Hi there. Today we're going to be walking through the process of doing the listing paperwork for a listing. So we're going to do a fake seller and we're going to walk our way through the listing documents. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we are. Can everybody see the screen? Thumbs up. Great. All right. So we're going to start a new transaction folder. And I am going to say that it is a new listing. And this is on zip forms, which I get to through MLS. I'm going to call it 123 Sesame Street. Franklin is my seller's last name. I'm going to say it's residential. It's going to be active. And then what I can do here is I can go to templates. I've already set up some templates for y'all. And I can say global residential listing. And then I'm going to click save. And it's going to bring up, when I go to the documents tab, my listing documents. So we're going to start with the exclusive right to represent seller. So the exclusive right to represent seller form is the listing agreement. We sort of refer to it as the listing agreement, but the name of the form is exclusive right to represent seller agreement. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to put the date that I am writing this listing agreement. And then on the next line, I'm going to put in the seller name. This is, oh, I forgot Franklin was their last name. So let's say, Ralph Franklin. Here we go. And we'll say, Ruby Franklin. There's a shout out to my niece. Ralph and Ruby are selling this house with the broker, Wainwright and Company Realtors, not you, the agent. Because if you remember from class, the listings belong to the firm, not the real estate agent. So that field is going to be Wainwright and Co. Realtors. We're going to say this is in the county of Bedford. So section 1 is the real property description. You are getting this information from the municipality GIS system or the CRS tax data that's attached to our MLS. You are going and getting this. Do not use an old listing to get this information. Because when you do that, you're trusting that that previous agent, number one, was diligent about their work, and number two, didn't transverse any numbers or anything, okay? So instead, you're going to go to the source, which is the municipality website, and you're going to look up the GIS tax records. You can also get there via MLS by going to the CRS tax data. And then we're going to say this is lot 2, block 3, didn't have a section, didn't have a map ID. But this next field, which is called or other legal description, I'm going to put in the tax ID or the parcel ID number there. That's where I'm going to put that in. And then, or more commonly known as 123 Sesame Street. Of course, that's not going to come up with something on the drop-down menu there because we are making this up. And this is going to be in Bedford, Virginia. And I'm going to say it does not include water frontage. Now, I could say does include, obviously, if it has water frontage, but in this case, I'm going to say does not. Section 2 states that the seller is not already involved with another listing agreement. okay? You obviously can see when it was last on the MLS, if you're picking this up as an expired listing or a canceled listing. I want you to be careful of listings that are still on the MLS marked as withdrawn. Withdrawn is a temporary status, and it implies that the listing has not expired yet. So if you do your research and somebody's asked you to come in and do a new listing for them, I want you to go check the MLS. If they're in there, if their house is in there as a canceled listing, an expired listing, or just an old listing, that's fine. But if their home is on the MLS as a withdrawn listing, you need to ask a few more questions, because withdrawn status is a temporary status, whereas canceled is a permanent status change, meaning the listing itself, not just the MLS entry, but the listing itself has been listed in, has been terminated. All right, moving on to personal property included. This is an opportunity to check with your seller to find out what personal property we're going to convey. We're going to say in here, refrigerator, electric range, dishwasher. This is also your opportunity to ask the seller, to your knowledge, do any of these have any flaws or anything that's a little special about them that maybe doesn't function the way it did when it came from the store? If they go, oh yeah, I forgot, we have a ruler, a plastic ruler slid in by the power button on the dryer because it sticks. Okay, now you have the occasion to say, well, that may or may not fly with a buyer. Have you had an appliance company come out and take a look at that? If they go, no, maybe that's a conversation now I want to have with my seller to say, how about we have an appliance company come out and just give us an idea about that? Maybe there's a fix for that. Because what I'm going to tell them is, and again, y'all, you know, I'm going to be talking about all the markets, not just specifically this market. This market, I'd be like, oh, you have to like duct tape the dryer door shut. Cool. Let's put it on the market anyway. But in regular markets, I'm going to want those deferred maintenance items fixed prior to going live on the market. Okay. If they're going to come up later, if they're going to come up in an inspection, if they're going to be a concern for a buyer, if a buyer is going to have to do them as soon as they buy the house, I want my seller to do them ahead of time. Number one, they can do them with a handyman. They don't have to hire a contractor. Number two, or they can do them themselves. Number two, if we go under contract with a buyer and it comes up as a material defect, then our contract says they have to be completed by a contractor. So it's going to cost them more money later, the seller more money later, to do it once we're under contract with a buyer. So this is also a great occasion to ask about the clothes washer and the clothes dryer. Those, you know, the kitchen appliances tend to always convey. The washer and dryer tend to be, it depends. It depends on whether they're leaving the washer and the dryer.
Can I ask a quick question there?
Of course.
So your range and dishwasher are included in that upper paragraph. Do you like to add that there so there's absolutely no question? Like, which would you prefer to see? Would you prefer to see everything listed there?
I would.
Okay.
I would, because I find that people are bad about reading the standard language. So I don't mind doubling up on documentation here. This is also a place where I will put I'll put a period, and then I will say chandelier. Why did I pick such a hard word to spell while we're live? Chandelier. Y'all just don't tell me if that's spelled wrong. Chandelier does not convey. That's where I'm going to list something that doesn't convey. I'm going to ask that seller, hey, is there anything in the house you're not leaving? And if they go, oh yeah, that built-in over there, that built-in bookshelf, my grandfather made that. We're going to remove that and take it with us. Okay, well, I'm going to say, I need you to remove that now. I need you to take it down, put it in the garage. Anything that is attached to the house that you're not planning on conveying with the home, you need to remove it now. I'm also going to put it in this section, but I want to be careful to make sure I include it in the MLS. Just because it's on this listing agreement, that doesn't make it part of the purchase contract later. It still has to be written into the purchase contract. But this is just an opportunity for me to lay out expectations with my seller that no, they said clothes washer, clothes dryer because we put it in the listing. We're going to also have, so they're not surprised later when it's listed on the MLS and then shows up in a contract, in a purchase contract. Okay. But yes, Jennifer, excellent question. They are mentioned in the standard language. I like to repeat them anyway. Same with the purchase contract. If I'm representing the buyer, I'm not going to leave it to that standard language. I like to exceed people's expectations so that I don't have to have an argument later. It's really truly about avoiding an argument later and just setting the full expectations and spelling them all out. I'm not in this business to get some like gotcha moments, you know, where I'm like, oh, but I gotcha. I just want everything to go nicely. You know, I don't want to fight with people. I don't want to have to explain myself 15 times or argue over a washer and a dryer, you know, whether it's attached or not attached. And, you know, I don't want to fight over that. So I'm going to just spell it all out. All right. Leased equipment. This is your opportunity to ask the seller, hey, is anything on the property leased? There are some hot water heaters that are leased. I know that sounds a little odd unless you've experienced it. Water softeners can be leased. Obviously, security alarm systems and propane tanks sometimes are leased. So ask about these. And then we're going to put in our listing price. So I'm going to put in our listing price here. And this system takes mercy on you and says, just give us the numbers. We'll figure out how to spell that out for you. Because quite frankly, before it did this, I would find that I had sometimes written $259 on that line because I'm not used to writing $259,000. So they kind of, when we went digital on this, they sort of took that out of our hands, which was nice. So then the listing period in number 6, I want to talk about this. I'm writing this contract, which is what it is. It's a listing contract. I'm writing it on April 7th. That doesn't mean this first date here in listing period is going to be April 7th. I'm most likely not going live on the MLS the same day I'm writing this agreement. So instead, this is what day will the property be available for purchase? So what day is it going to go on the MLS? And MLS rules and regulations and the National Association of Realtors Clear Cooperation Rule require it to go on the MLS within 24 hours of this commencement date, unless you have an MLS exclusion form in place. NAR's Clear Cooperation Rule says we're not going to have these like pocket listing, in-house listing situations anymore. We're going to make sure everybody has an opportunity to know about a listing. And the Clear Cooperation Rule says, unless you have an exclusion form on file with your local association stating that the seller is asking for it not to be on the MLS, then it's going to be on the MLS within 24 hours. So this date here may be the next week because I got to get my photographers there, right? So I may say, okay, today is Thursday the 7th. We're going to go live on April 14th, but it doesn't have to be that, y'all. You can do this agreement. And if they say, hey, we don't want to list it until the end of June or the end of May when school's out, that's fine. I would just make this May 28th. So instead, for our example here, I'm going to say April 14th. And then I'm going to put in the expiration date. And I'm going to give you a tip here. I typically do 6-month listings. So let's go 6 months out. And then I'm going to give you a little tip that I do. So we're going to go to April to May, to June, to July, August, September. We're going to go to October, and October 14th makes sense here, but I am going to make it October 16th because what if it goes off the market that Friday and that Saturday somebody wants to go see it? So I always go to the 6-month mark or 3-month mark or whatever you're doing, and then I go to the next Saturday. If it happens to be, if it lands on a Monday, let it be a Monday. But if it's landed on a Thursday or a Friday, I'm probably going to go 6 months and 2 days just to let it expire on a Sunday night. Okay. And then we're going to go to the next section and stop me if you have any questions. Section 7 states, that the broker and seller's agent's duties are as such. This is what me, the listing agent, my obligations are to this contract, and it's perform in accordance in terms with this agreement, seek a sale at the price and terms agreeable to my seller, present in a timely manner all offers and counter offers, even when the property is already under contract. So if somebody calls me and says, hey, I want to make a backup offer, absolutely, I'd be happy to present it, send it over to me. Okay. D, disclosing to the seller all material facts related to the property that I have actual knowledge of. If I go over just to check on the house and there's water in the basement, I have to call my seller and say, hey, we have a problem. There's water in the basement. Now, I don't know why you wouldn't do that, but this is saying you are obligated to do so. And E states that you have to account for in a timely manner all money and property received in which the seller has an interest. This is a little abstract because as the listing agent, you're not handling the earnest money deposit usually. It does not relieve you of your obligation to account for it though. This is why, as the listing agent, you need to check to make sure that the earnest money deposit was received, that it was deposited. This is why you will want to reach out to a buyer's agent and say, hey, would you let me know when the earnest money arrives, please? Okay. Everyone, listing agent, buyer's agent broker, listing agent broker, they're all required to account in a timely manner for the money or property which is received that the seller may or may not have an interest. Excuse me, that they do have an interest. And the seller absolutely has an interest in that earnest money deposit. Okay. 8, seller's duties. And I read these out to my seller. Okay. I want them to understand how they could be in breach of this contract. So I say, seller, you're going to agree to work exclusively with me. You're going to pay the compensation we set forth in paragraph 10, and I'll explain that to you in a moment. You're going to provide accurate information regarding the property to me. You're going to inform me of any factors that may keep you from being able to sell the home, like getting behind on your mortgage or not paying your property taxes. I work for you. I need to know these things. I can help you with that, but I need to know about them. You're going to refer to me any inquiries you receive on the property. So if somebody at work or one of your neighbors reaches out to you about the property, give them my number. Here's a couple of extra business cards that you can give to anybody who ends up knocking on your door or calling you about the house. Here's a couple of my business cards, just direct them to me. And seller, this is important. There's a reason why it's in all caps. Do not disclose any information to anyone other than me about the property, about showings, about anything that might weaken your negotiating power. So this is why I'm going to make sure that I indicate to you right now, seller, when there is a showing happening, I want you to load up the car and go. I don't want you to be here during the showings because another agent might ask you questions that might undermine our negotiating power, or the buyer, the potential buyer might ask you questions that might undermine our negotiating ability. Plus, it's just nice for the buyers to be able to walk around the property, tour the property, and be candid with their agent. And I find that they're less likely to do that if you're still here. So during the home inspection, during the appraisal, during the showings, I'm going to ask for you to go ahead and leave the property. Okay. You need to know as the agent now if that's going to be a problem for your seller. And you need to figure that out. And this is where I also say, okay, what are we going to do about the dog? You know, and we need to brainstorm that. Or do I need to indicate in the private remarks that that the buyer's agents need to be giving a 1-hour showing notice so that one of my sellers can get home and crate the dog? When people say things like, oh, he's a sweetheart, he'd never hurt anybody. You need to say, yes, but some people have allergies. You know, some people are hesitant around even friendly dogs. So it's going to be best that you either take him on a walk or you go ahead and crate him during the showing. If you have to, we can find like a storage room that maybe he can just sit with some doggy treats and kind of stay there, and we'll put a sign on the door, you know, please don't let the dog out. So you've got to have these conversations with your seller, you know, otherwise you're not setting them up for success. Okay. G, retain full responsibility for the property, including utilities, maintenance, physical security, and liability during the term of this agreement. You've got to keep up with your deferred maintenance during the listing period. Pay your property taxes. Make sure you're keeping up on any maintenance and cleaning in the home. And What's nice is you're able to say that to them because you're just reading them this clause. You're not identifying them as somebody who is not keeping a tidy home and calling them out on that. You're just hitting these bullet points in the seller's duties. And it is a nice way to be able to say, include cleaning in that explanation of what this clause says. H, you're going to disclose to me if you, seller, have ever been an active or inactive real estate agent. The reason for that is we have to disclose that in the listing, that the seller is an inactive Virginia real estate agent. They are an inactive North Carolina real estate agent. The point of that is to put the other side of the transaction on notice that they may be dealing with someone, negotiating with someone who has a higher level of understanding and a slight advantage having been a real estate agent in the negotiations. And I disclose that the property is or is not tenant occupied. Okay. And then there's some additional provisions. And this first one, 9A, is really critical for you to understand. It's the material information disclosure. It says, seller, if I know about a material defect on the property, I have no choice but to disclose that to potential buyers and their agents. I don't have an option here. So is there any, and this is a style choice for me. Some agents will say, so I don't want to know what's wrong with your property. Okay. I'm not in that camp. I'm in the camp of, I need you to tell me now anything that may be wrong with the property so we can get in front of that now, get it fixed now, or disclose it now. So I just put a new property on the market this morning, and the microwave door is a little wonky. So I went ahead and put in the private remarks, microwave oven door needs repair to convey an as-is condition. Done. I have now disclosed that material defect, if you will, in a manner in which everyone will have an opportunity to know about it. I've also said it's going to convey an as-is condition. It still shuts. It's just a little wonky. But that could be construed as material defect. It's obviously going to come up on a home inspection. So I'm going to go ahead and disclose it. If the seller said to me, well, I don't want you to tell people that the microwave oven door is a little wonky, I'm so sorry. I don't have a choice. I have to. And that is the Realtor Code of Ethics, stating that I have to disclose this. It's the Virginia Real Estate Board saying I have to disclose this. We are a buyer beware state. The buyer is entitled to do their inspections, but I don't have a way around this. I'm sorry. Really, where this becomes a problem is when a transaction falls through, you're left with all of this actual knowledge from the home inspection report of defects on the property. You as the listing agent now have some disclosure obligations that are actually even higher than that of the seller. And I have had to make the recommendation to folks before, to agents before, that they may not be able to continue with the listing if that seller is barring them from disclosing those material defects. And in fact, it would mean that no one at our firm could continue with that listing. And they may have to go find another firm. And if they choose not to tell that new listing firm the material defects on their house, that's that seller's business. But I'm not going to be able to continue to hold that listing if we know material defects and the seller is telling us we're not allowed to disclose those. Okay. And if you're having an issue with that, just call me. I will say as a caveat to that, if it gets repaired or fixed, it is no longer a disclosure obligation. The only exemption to that rule is flood insurance claims. A new law came down last year that states, I'm going to get this wrong, if a certain number of occurrences like insurance claims due to flooding occur within a certain span of time, it will become a permanent disclosure, even if you've had a waterproofing system put in. Okay. And I can get you the details on that. All right. 9B, residential property disclosure. If this home is required to comply with the Virginia Residential Property Disclosure Act, it just means that the seller has to say, I'm filling out this form to say I'm not making any warranties about the property. Therefore, buyer, you're on notice that you should do your own due diligence. This form is called the Residential Property Disclosure Act form. And what it says is that there are only a few disclosures that are required, lead-based paint being one of them. That's why we have a separate lead-based paint form for the sellers to sign. And there are exemptions to the Virginia Residential Property Disclosure Act. Those would include estate sales, foreclosures, and new construction, because in those cases, the seller has never lived in the home. They can't even make a disclosure about a home they've never lived in. Okay. 9, fair housing. I say, seller, I want to remind you that we're going to review all offers on terms and price. We are not allowed to discriminate against anyone for any of the protected class reasons. And because of that, we'll be reviewing the offers just on their terms and price alone. And this is my moment where I can say also, as a personal business practice, if I receive any buyer love letters where the buyer's agent wants to explain to me how amazing their buyers are, I am not going to submit those to you, because they could inadvertently expose us to some fair housing issues or accusations of fair housing issues. So we will be going by the merit of the offer alone. You need to know now if your seller is going to have any problems with fair housing. Okay. I may not take a listing if I find that the seller is going to make some fair housing based decisions when we're reviewing offers down the road. I'd rather know now than I would rather know when we receive offers and they go, well, tell me about this person. You know, I don't know about this person. I know they gave me this offer and I'm here with the offer to review it with you, because we're going to go on the merit of the offer alone. Okay. 9D, property owners association. Hey, seller, is this home in a property owners association? Call me if they give you a wishy-washy answer, because normally it's no or yes, but sometimes it's like, no, but I do pay $100 for the road every year. Well, that may be a road maintenance agreement, not necessarily a property owners association. But I got to find out if that road maintenance is voluntary or not. So this is about trying to peel back the layers and find out answers to all these questions by asking these questions as we go through the listing agreement. E is pretty easy. Is this a condominium resale or not? F, lead-based paint disclosure. Was this home built prior to 1978 or not? Pretty easy. It either was or it wasn't. If it was, then we're going to have to complete a lead-based paint form. And then G, disclosure statement for residential property previously used to manufacture methamphetamine. Seller, do you have any idea if this home had ever been used to manufacture methamphetamine? This is normally a awkward question. And, you know, they go, not that I know of, you know, I mean, it's like nobody wants to say, no, this home has never been used to manufacture methamphetamine. They always say, I mean, not that I know of. You know, great, good enough. Okay. 10, compensation. Now, people call me all the time to go, Ashley, is this where I put the amount, the total amount? Is this where I put what I'm going to give the buyer's agent? I'm going to tell it to you this way. You're going to go big to little. Compensation is the big brokerage. That's the total brokerage. That's the total amount we are charging to list this home, of which we will be splitting it with a buyer's agent. So you go big, then you go little. We're going to tell the seller the big amount, then we're going to go down to 11 and do the smaller amount, which my rule is it should be half. But I don't want to get into actual numbers here, since we're going to be putting this on YouTube. So just call me if you are wondering what those amounts should be, because I can tell you what Wainwright's going to do all day long. I cannot tell you what other firms charge, because that would be called price fixing. And I will never tell a seller, oh, everybody charges XYZ, ever. That's price fixing. You're not allowed to do it, because you don't know. You don't know what everybody does. There is no standard. There is no norm. There is Wainwright's charge. And I will tell you all day long what Wainwright charges for a listing. And that's how I explain it to my seller. I say, okay, and as for compensation, I always start with telling them my broker requires us to charge X commission, X total commission. However, I want you to understand that I'll be splitting that 50-50 with a buyer's agent who brings us a buyer. So that's not the total amount that my firm is getting. That is the total amount, because we're going to share with the buyer's agent. Okay. And then I'm going to go through how I've earned the brokerage. The property sold, exchanged, or leased with a purchase option to anyone during the listing period, with or without the assistance of a broker. That's why if a buyer comes with no representation, that total brokerage is still the amount that has been earned. I may choose as a listing agent to discount it if there's no agent on the other side of the transaction. I may not. Most likely, Ashley discounts it, but I don't discount it by 50% because I am going to have to do some work for that buyer's agent on the other, for that buyer on the other side of the transaction who has chosen to come to us unrepresented. Okay. I am not going to do dual agency. I'm just not going to do it. And I don't want you to do it either. You have told your seller you're going to do all these things for them, and then you're not going to be able to do as many of them, or even the important ones, if you're also representing the buyer. But that buyer can be unrepresented. That's fine. B, anyone produces a buyer ready, willing, and able to pay during the listing period upon terms consistent with this agreement, with or without the assistance of a broker. C, if you, the seller, act to prevent the sale of a property by attempting to cancel this agreement without my consent, or by renting the property or granting an option on the property during the listing period, or by breaching the purchase agreement. What this means is if your seller changes their mind and says, never mind, I know we're under contract, but I'm not selling my house. Well, nobody's going to make them sell their house, okay, except a judge. But we may say, listen, we have earned our compensation. Now, unfortunately, that is tricky. That is a sticky wicket. You don't want to be somebody who's suing sellers all over town for commission, right? So just call me if this were to come up. Call me if you have somebody with cold feet, whether that be a seller or a buyer. And then we're going to go down to D, and that is essentially an extension past the expiration date, unless they have gone ahead and listed with another broker. So if you've put 30 days in here, that you're allowed to come back in as their agent, their listing agent, within 30 days of the expiration of the listing. But one day after your listing expires, they list with a competing firm here in town, or even our same firm, they have now entered into a new listing agreement, and your extension that you've built into D no longer applies. Okay. What it's trying to protect us from is for a seller and a buyer going, hey, why don't you come back next month and we'll just work this out amongst ourselves. That's what it's trying to avoid. All right, 11, authorized cooperation and compensation. There are two parts to a buyer's agent. Cooperation, which you must do. You must cooperate with any agent who is bringing a buyer to look at your property. That could be an out of area agent. That can be an agent from our area. You have to cooperate. You do not have to compensate agents from outside of the area. Now, I'm going to tell you to do it, because why would you not? Why would you not welcome any buyer's agent who wants to bring a buyer, even if they're from outside of our area? You have to give them cooperation. You do not have to give outside of our area agents compensation. The compensation is a function of this agreement and is offered through our MLS. It is only offered to the MLS agents who belong to the MLS in which you have offered that compensation. Okay. That's why when you go outside of your own MLS and you go to show a property outside of our MLS, you have to negotiate commission prior to showing it, because you have not been offered any compensation because you're not a member of that MLS. So I want you to call me if you're ever going to show an out of area listing. Maybe it's a listing right here in Roanoke, but it's listed through a New River Valley agent on New River Valley's MLS. They have not offered you compensation. We have to negotiate that prior to showing the house. It's easy to do. I'm happy to walk you through the steps. Just call me. This is where you, the listing agent, are saying, I'm willing to provide X% or a flat fee of such and such. That's because the MLS, one of the MLS rules is that there has to be compensation. I don't care if it's $1 on there. It is not a valid listing if it doesn't have compensation to a buyer's agent, because it can't go on the MLS, because one of the rules of MLS is there has to be compensation offered. And that's why we have that flat fee in there, so that we can say, We're not saying it has to be a percent. We're just saying it has to be some type of compensation. Now, the Department of Justice has lawsuits going on right now against several big firms across the country and several associations, and we'll see what comes of that. We may see a restructuring of how compensation is offered and how compensation is earned, but for now, this is how it's still working. 11D states that there could be disclosed dual and designated agency. It just means that seller, it may be that one of my longtime buyer clients sees this listing and decides it's the one they want to buy. That would make me, the listing agent, a dual agent. I want to assure you, I will never do dual agency with a stranger. If I get a cold call on your property, I am not going to represent them. If I have a client that I've had for months and they get a raise at work or a promotion or the interest rate drops and they can now come look at your property, unfortunately, I already represent both of you and I would have to be a dual agent. And I just want you to understand that that may happen. Designated agency could happen, and that's not an issue at all. That just means another Wainwright agent brings the buyer. So at that point, our broker becomes a dual agent because our broker is over both. And then if they have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. And then we go down to 12, multiple listing service. Was I busy explaining and forgot to fill anything out? Yes, I'm explaining it, y'all, and I wasn't checking the boxes. So is not, was built prior to 1978, compensation, I'll put in, you know what to put in there. Call me if you don't know what to put in there. 30 days or whatever you want to put in there. I usually put 0, but that's just because I'm too nice. You don't have to put 0. And then you know what to put in here for the authorized cooperation and compensation. So let's go to the next page. So multiple listing service, seller, we have to put it on the MLS. I have to put it on the MLS within 24 hours. If you don't want it on the MLS, I have to do a special form and file it at the local Realtors Association indicating that you are choosing not to have it on the MLS. But the MLS is the opportunity to make it available to the widest audience possible and potentially receive the highest and best offers that would be available. So we are going to submit pertinent information onto the MLS. That's A. B, it's understood that RVAR and the MLS are not parties to this agreement. It is a vehicle by which we are going to be advertising this property. C states that the seller is authorizing the broker to place an electronic lockbox, check that box. Or if it was contractor lockbox, I would check here and say contractor lockbox, but you should be using an actual lockbox, an electronic lockbox. Our super boxes have a lot of bells and whistles that will help you be sure you know who's in the home. D, the seller understands that, I don't remember what this one says, y'all. The seller understands and agrees that in consideration of the use of broker services and facilities and the facilities of the MLS, the seller and their heirs and assignees agree that all salespersons, brokers, the MLS, RVAR, and their directors, officers, and employees, that we are not responsible for property damage, personal injury, theft, anything that could happen on this property. So this is where I remind my sellers, do you have any firearms, jewelry, checkbooks, credit cards, prescription medications? All of those need to be locked up. Please lock them up. Yes, buyers agents are expected to stay with their buyers at all times while they're in the home. But sometimes, and me too, sometimes I'll be in there and one goes this way, one goes that way. I can't be with them every second. Okay. So I need you to lock up anything valuable or anything you would not want to have removed from the home. Lock it up, please. I'm using our electronic lock boxes that only agents can get into, and those codes expire every single day, and they have to renew their codes every day. But that doesn't mean those buyers agents are going to be able to be with every person who's in the home the entire time. 13, authorization regarding internet display. Yes, seller, it's going to be on the internet. If you have a problem with that, we need to chat about it because it has to go on the MLS, which would then syndicate it out to lots of websites on the internet. Here is the opt out of the internet box. If that is what they want to do, perhaps they have a high profile job. Perhaps they have already decided they're selling it to their neighbor. then you could opt it out of the internet here, and you're going to, in addition to this, have to do an MLS exclusion form that's filed with the local association. All right, then we're going to go down here. And these are talking about virtual office websites. I just basically say, these are not third parties like Zillow or Realtor.com or Yahoo Real Estate. These are actual broker websites that function as virtual office websites. So I'm going to go ahead and say does not authorize and does not authorize on automated estimates and third parties. I can't control Zillow, Realtor.com, Yahoo Real Estate, any of that, but I can control other broker websites to say, no, thank you. We would not like for people to be able to leave comments about my listing or automated estimates about my listing. So I'm going to say does not. And then 14 states that I am going to place a for sale sign on the property. I am going to advertise the property. Okay. And I am going to show the property during reasonable hours. Let's go ahead and decide what that looks like for you, seller. And seller, you are going to agree to allow anybody who is a real estate agent who has a buyer to come in here and take a look at the property. Now, this is where the more high dollar homes may say, I don't want anybody in here unless you have looked at a pre-qual letter, Ashley. Well, that's the seller's right. The seller can say that. And I'm going to put that in the private remarks, and I'm going to make it appointment only. I'm going to make sure they reach out to me or text listing agent or call listing agent. And I'm going to make sure that the buyer's agents comply with that rule. I get to manage the access to the home according to the seller's wishes, so long as they do not violate any fair housing rules. Additionally, D, use the broker's best judgment in determining how and when to divulge the existence of an offer or offers on the property. I cannot lie, okay? But I do get to be in the driver's seat about strategy. I better be involving my seller in our strategizing. But ultimately, I am the professional. And seller is going to let me know if they do not want the broker to ever divulge the existence of offers on the property. If that seller says, no, I don't want you to ever give anybody any details about how many offers we have or what type of terms those offers have, no, you may not do that. Well, then I can't do that. You know, it's the seller's house. Disclose or not disclose whether seller paid financing concessions can be disclosed after closing. So seller, are you okay if there's closing costs written into our offer that I disclose that on the MLS when I close it out in the MLS, because it would help with comparatives. It would help with for the appraisers to know what the net offer was. And then I have to say, seller, 15 states, I need to know if there are any recording devices in the home because I have to disclose that. Okay. You're also going to release me and my firm from anything that may come about doing with state and federal wiretapping laws. Okay. And you understand that visitors to the property should not engage in photography, videography, or video telephony, y'all. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And that the seller should take this opportunity to remove any personal items that they wouldn't want to have show up on a YouTube channel for a buyer to look at because the buyer's in Kansas. Okay. You may want to post something. You may want to write something in the private remarks that says, please do not have video tours without permission from the listing agent, or call listing agent for permission to do a video tour. People are getting real lax with that, y'all. I see it happening all the time. And all I can think is, I wonder if they ask the listing agent if they can do that. Okay. 16, broker and seller's agent's disclaimer. Seller, I'm just the best real estate agent you could ever hire. I am not an attorney, a tax advisor, a lender, an appraiser, a surveyor, a structural engineer, a home inspector, or other professional service provider. Okay. But I have lots of those professionals on speed dial. Happy to connect you with someone if we have a need. 17, seller, if you default on this contract and you want to terminate the contract, I may consider it, but you need to come to me and talk to me about if you're displeased with our relationship. And here's my broker's name and number. I'm going to put it on here for you in case you have any concerns about it. And then additional documents. We're going to attach the Residential Property Disclosure Act form. We're going to attach the lead-based paint disclosure form. There is not a septic system. It is not a waterfront property. And I do not have a RESPA disclosure. A RESPA disclosure is where the firm or the agent has an affiliated business relationship with another vendor, like a title company, like a settlement company, like a lender's, a mortgage company, where that listing agent or that broker of that firm, the firm may be receiving funds for ancillary services that are associated with this transaction. You will see those RESPA disclosures from some of the big franchises where they're like, you understand that XYZ real estate company also has an ownership interest in the title insurance company. And if you choose to elect to use this company for title insurance, XYZ real estate company may receive proceeds from that sale. I don't have any of those. You don't have to do a RESPA disclosure, okay? Not how I'm trying to make my money. And then I do not usually have any additional terms or authorizations, but this is where you might choose to say, seller may sell property to their cousin, Donna Wright. I'm just using her as an example because she is my first cousin, without any compensation due to Wainwright and Company Realtors. Okay, that's because the seller has said, gosh, Ashley, I'm so tired of waiting for Donna to decide whether she's going to buy this house or not. Can we just go ahead and put it on the market? But if she finally rallies and says, okay, I'm ready, I want to buy the house, can we just drop this? Maybe I'm willing to do that. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm willing to say in here, seller may sell property to their cousin Donna Wright without any buyer's agent compensation, so long as Donna Wright decides not to employ a buyer's agent. So then the listing agent side would still apply. Maybe I want to do a caveat like this. Don't write this language yourself. Call me instead, okay? And we will brainstorm it together. But that would be where something like that would go. 20, faxes are the same as originals. Electronic signatures, yes, we're going to do electronic signatures. Wire fraud is happening. Please do not ever wire any money without getting the settlement company on the phone and confirming the wire instructions. And this is the entire agreement. Doesn't matter what we talked about. What's in here is what matters. And then everybody's going to sign it. And now we have a listing. There is a whole page on what dual agency is and what you can and cannot do, and a whole page on designated agency and what you can and cannot do. Any questions about the exclusive right to represent seller agreement? Yes, I just spent 45 minutes on one form, y'all. I want you to understand it. I want you to go through it. The other forms are quite simple comparatively. Miki, yes, you have a question, please.
Yes, I do. Question on additional information. Is that somewhere you would also put property sold as is or subject to seller finding suitable housing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's more critical to put that in the purchase contract.
Right,
But
correct.
certainly you could put it here just to document that those are the wishes of your seller. Yes.
Perfect. Thank
And
you.
actually it would protect the seller, because if they've
Yes.
said, I'm only going to sell my house to somebody who will give us a subject to suitable housing contingency, right? Let's say I didn't write that into the listing and somebody brought us an offer that didn't have that. It actually legally would obligate that seller to pay our compensation because we didn't have that as a term in the listing. Now, am I ever going to do my seller dirty like that? No, I'm not. Okay. But yes, that would be an excellent legal reason why you would want to include that language.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Excellent question. Okay, so the MLS input sheet, I'm not going to go all the way through it with you guys. Instead, I want you to understand what has to be filled out and what doesn't have to be filled out. As you go through this, you're going to tab your way through it, filling out the information. Anything that has a header that is in black is a required field, and you're going to have to fill it out. If it is a gray field like basement, if yes, basement, if no, those are optional. You do not have to fill those out, okay? And it gets really obvious when you get down into essentially the sections where you can pick the items. These have absolutely no color on the header, which means these are 100% optional. You just fill them out if you want to. I do recommend you fill out as much as possible. You have no idea if somebody might be doing a quick search and saying, I want horses permitted. If you have a property where there is a big field and it's fenced in and it is horses permitted, you are doing a disservice to your seller by not checking that box. In-law quarters, manufactured allowed, a pond. I saw a listing on the MLS this week. The private remarks was the only mention of there being a pond on the back of the property. I looked at the old listing and they had some beautiful pictures of the pond. This new listing did not. Why in the world would you not check the box for pond and put a photo of the pond? I don't understand it. So underground utilities, another one people kind of miss. Some people are looking for a property that has underground utilities. So all of these check boxes are ways in which buyer's agents could be doing a really niche search on the MLS. So fill it out as much as you can. And then you're going to have your seller sign the bottom of every one of these pages. The purpose of that is because then it is the seller warranting that information, not you warranting that information. If they have told you that it is a public sewer home and there's really a septic tank, there's going to be a layer of insulation for you. If they have signed this MLS input sheet that you have filled out with them, and they have signed where they told you it's public sewer and it's not, okay? That's why you're getting these filled out. That's why you're having them sign them, not because you just need this information to put it into the MLS. This is absolutely a risk management tool for you and me, that it is the seller telling you about the property, not you guessing, not you taking it from an old listing, not you taking it from the GIS, okay? All right, let's go to the next form. We have the residential property disclosure form. We've got our property address at the top and the seller is going to sign it. That's it, y'all. That's all there is to it. We've got the residential septic system disclosure. If there happened to be a septic system, it wants to know, has the property been granted a waiver from the health department or not? You need to ask your seller. And if they go, not that I know of, most likely they've not been granted a waiver. A waiver would be for a non-conforming septic system. And typically when there's a waiver, there's a process in place to bring it up to compliance. And then summary of rights and obligations. This is what I call the long form for the Residential Property Disclosure Act. I want you to use both. I want you to use the summary of rights and obligations, and I also want you to use the residential property disclosure form. It simply states that the seller is not making any warranties about all of these items. And if you go look at the residential property disclosure, there's a hyperlink here. That hyperlink takes you to the long form. So the short form is just pointing you to the long form, okay? Then we have the lead-based paint disclosure form. It is critical that these disclosure forms are filled out and signed by the seller first. The seller must make disclosures before the buyer can acknowledge disclosures. It has to go in that order. And then you really need to upload these to the MLS so that the disclosure forms are there, so that they are submitted with the offer. And what your seller is saying here is, I'm saying, seller, do you have any actual knowledge of lead-based paint in your home? And if they go, no, but it's old, it probably has lead-based paint. I say, no, I'm asking if you have any actual knowledge of lead-based paint in your home. And they go, no. Then they're going to initial A2. And then typically it's going to be B2, because if they don't have any actual knowledge, they certainly don't have any reports or records. But if they do have reports and records, then you're going to be doing A1 and B1, or excuse me, AI and BI. And that is because perhaps they had some testing done when they were doing a special type of loan, or they were purchasing it from HUD and HUD required a lead-based paint test. It's okay. You just have to then proffer up those test results. Okay. And then this is the part everybody forgets as a listing agent. The listing agent must initial F. that the listing agent has informed the seller of the seller's obligations and is aware of his or her responsibility to ensure compliance. And I am going to email from here. I'm going to email my seller a copy of HUD's brochure called Protect Your Family from Lead in the Home. That way I know I have made them aware of all of their obligations. And then we're going to all, both sellers and me, are going to sign the bottom of this lead-based paint form. And then this form is really cool. Unfortunately, it doesn't map correctly. So you're probably going to have to, use it as a blank form and take it into your electronic signature software to fill it out. Because as you see here, it doesn't map correctly and they've not fixed it. So it's got my seller's names in the prepared by section. And you don't want to correct it here because it's connected to your entire envelope, because it's going to remap across all the other forms and you don't want that. So instead, just take this information out. You can leave the address in there if you want. Take the information out, print it as a PDF and take it to your electronic signature software and fill it out. What you're using this form is to give the seller an idea right then and there at the listing appointment as to what they're going to net from the sale of their home. This is how in other markets you find out the seller's upside down on the house. So you're going to put in the selling price, the commission, how much they'd pay towards a termite inspection, if they're paying any closing costs on behalf of the buyer, well inspection, septic inspection, what is the miscellaneous fees or repairs that are going to be obligated onto the seller. And you're guessing on a lot of this because you don't have an offer yet. But this lets you go down, and then this is the excuse why I get to get nosy and get in their business and find out how much they owe on their mortgage. Because this is where I say, okay, and let's go over the payoff. I assume you still have a mortgage on the property, right? And they go, yes. I say, well, do you remember how much currently you may have outstanding on the mortgage? And then that's where I get to ask the question. And it's not just me being nosy, right? I'm going to fill it in on this form so that then I can see the total payoff amounts and estimate what they're going to net on the sale of their home. If that net says something like negative $2,000, we've got some decisions to make. We either need to list the house for more money, or I need to set the expectations for my seller that they don't have enough equity in their home to be able to come to the closing and not bring money. Again, obviously, I'm talking about a different style of market than the one we're in currently, but it's important to understand how this works in all markets. Right now, you're saying, terrific, looks like you're going to net about $30,000 on the sale of your home that you bought 5 months ago. Congratulations. But in other markets, this is where you would find out early on if we're going to have a problem. The other thing I like about this form is it sets the standard for when we start to receive offers. We've already worked up the sheet. We've already worked up the sheet at full list price. So if at full list price, we know that they are going to walk away with $10,000, any offer over list price, any offer under list price, we already have like a down and dirty version of how much money we're going to walk away with. We already know at what point those numbers no longer work. We know how much wiggle room the seller has, and we know how much excess profit they're going to make over and above that list price if an offer comes in above list price. Does that make sense? It makes it much easier to review offers. Instead, I'm calling them to say, hey guys, we got an offer, and I'm glad we got an offer, but it's $5,000 below list price. And I'll remind you that when we did our seller's net sheet, we realized we really only had about $7,000 of wiggle room there. So this one is one we may want to counter offer and see if we can bump them up a little bit so we can maybe have a little bit more money to walk away with when we close. Does that make sense? It's an excellent tool to use. And then I think that's all my forms. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.